I'm Dr. Ann Guzzo, composer in the music department and the Associate Director of the University of Wyoming National Park Service Research Station up in Grand Teton National Park. The state of Wyoming has no full-time symphony or opera company, no full-time professional symphony or opera. We have some good symphonies in the state, but they're not full-time. And as you see in this photo, this is the New York Philharmonic. We have nothing like this in our state. We have no major professional ballet or professional dance troupe of any kind, at least that I'm aware of. We have no string quartets, no chamber music groups that are full-time. Why would a composer want to live in the state of Wyoming? And the answer is here. What it does have are soaring mountains and natural spaces that are incredibly inspiring. So here I have a picture of Grand Teton National Park, and it's a photo that I took. And as you can see, it says, you don't have to be a talented photographer to get an amazing shot of the Grand Tetons. And I would say that's true of a lot of things in Wyoming. And so I'm going to take you on a little tour here. We also have wildlife in every corner of the state. And here's a picture I took. It's on the border of Laramie. I just walked out of my house and went a block or two, and here were these antelope. So here's two pronghorn does. Pronghorn are their own amazing species. They're not related to deer or goats. They're just their own thing. They have hollow fur, and so when they raise their little tube of fur or hide, their outer coating, it's like having a down jacket on all the time. Makes them perfectly fit for Wyoming. So two beautiful does right there. Here I'm going to show you. I drove about 15 minutes from Laramie, maybe 20 minutes to a canyon nearby, and saw a giant herd of Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, some of which are endangered. So a herd of about 40. I got a picture of a couple of little ones here and an older male. Here's a picture of the Laramie Valley on my left, and one of what I call our local Pokemon. Here is a prairie dog. This little critter shares the valley with us and makes a lot of noise if you walk by because they want to warn each other. So there's something. And then here we have a hungry yearling grizzly bear in Grand Teton National Park. And I love the scientific name of grizzlies. The scientific name is Ursus arctos horribilis. And they are certainly horrible if you are the victim of a grizzly bear attack. Have to learn how not to do that. But they're active and alive up in the north part of the state, where I work as a summer position. Here's a local resident, the moose, Alces up in our mountains an hour to our west, the Medicine Bow Range. And then here's one of my favorite hobbies, meandering through the mountains to find porcini or Boletus edulis, a mushroom that I just love to save and use in Italian food and other cooking. So you see that there's a lot of interesting natural stuff around, and I actually had to stop myself before posting elk, mule deer, bison, foxes, bald eagles, hawks, not to mention many, many landscapes and flowers. And I snuck one in here. So here we have our state flower, the Indian paintbrush, and we have me hiking in the snowies in the winter. And then the other really, really important thing that Wyoming has is people, friendly people who know stuff, who want to work with you and let you ask many, many questions. So as a composer schooled in music, I have some science background, but very little. And so I had the chance to work in the state here in Wyoming at the UCross Foundation. It's an artist's residency. And a few years back, a friend of mine who's a scientist gathered a group of several scientists and several artists and then paired them at an artist's residency. So at that space, I was paired with a geologist. And what ended up happening was amazing collaborative work, both from the science side and the art side. So in this picture, I have on my left, I think it's your left too, Naomi Ward, the head of botany and a microbiologist, paired with poet Harvey Hicks. And in the middle, I have Dr. Ron Frost, geologist, holding up a chunk of clinker, a kind of a fire-baked rock. with Allie Grossman, who's a videographer. And in the right, there's me standing there looking with Michael Dillon at the toy piano. Michael Dillon is a zoology professor who has expertise in bees. And Anne Hild, who is standing above the piano, and Anne Hild is a rangeland ecologist. So I had the beautiful chance to work with all of these people. And if you look at that photo above the toy piano, what we're doing is we're creating a field transect, but an audible field transect. So a field transect, for those who don't know, is where you take some sort of a measuring tape or band, and you string it out across a landscape you want to understand. So in this case, it was the prairie. So we strung out this landscape, and every few feet we would measure what was there. And then I assigned a musical pitch or tone to what was there. And so we created this interactive art piece where you put tiles on the piano from the box above, and it tells you what pitches to play via iconography. So if you see, for example, a forb, a flower, you know it's to push this key right here. So I created a playable prairie, but we thought there might be some scientific applications too, because sometimes looking at the numbers from a scientific point of view doesn't quite tell you everything, and somehow listening can get a new way of looking at a prairie, or a new way of hearing a prairie. So that was a wonderful project I was involved in. Later, I worked with Naomi Ward and Harvey Hicks, a poet, who taught me about a bunch of microbes. Now, Naomi had just won this giant National Science Foundation grant to do a microbial survey across the state of Wyoming. And thinking about how these microbes worked, she taught me 10 or 20 microbes and how they worked, and being fascinated with the process, I took those processes that some microbes used and made them musical. So here's a piece that I jokingly call Wiggle and Snap. It's about the Corynebacterium, and the Corynebacterium is a bacteria, or a small microbe, on a stem, and then it has several sort of little rods growing off the top, almost like a dandelion seed. And when these things are ready to reproduce, one of them will just snap off. And Naomi played me some sounds of snapping microbes. And they sort of vibrate, and then they snap off when they're ready to grow their own family, if you will. And I thought that was just such an interesting process that I wrote a piece of music using that process. So this movement from a piece I call The Carnival of the Microbes involves wiggling and snapping. So the snapping is pulling the string so far off of a string instrument that when it snaps back, it hits the keyboard or the fingerboard and makes a snapping sound. I also used tapping the instruments, and I allowed the percussionists to choose their own snapping instruments, but among some of the options I gave them were snapping dry sticks or bubble wrap. And my percussionist chose bubble wrap for this piece. So I'm going to let you listen to some of it. The other thing I want to tell you about this piece is that there's wiggling, there's snapping, but also there's an emotional element. And that is my emotional element, my awe and amazement at the beauty of this whole world of microbes that we don't even get to see with our eyes. So here's a piece about Wyoming, or at least one of the microbes in Wyoming, that I learned about from a Wyoming scientist and was performed by the Colorado Chamber Orchestra, a great orchestra nearby. So that was one level of inspiration. Let me move on to the next one. Based on the amazing migration routes scientifically mapped here at UW by Matt Kaufman et al. At UW, the behavior of the antelope pronghorn as I observed it, I wrote another piece called Antelope Pavane. Now, a pavane is a kind of a French dance from King Louis XIV's reign, so from a long time ago in France, and it's an elegant, stately dance. We play a lot of them in classical music, and the idea is to present yourself to the royalty. And I feel like antelope have sort of two speeds, and one is beautifully standing, grazing, and looking elegant, and then this glorious floating herd across the prairie. And so I hope you get a chance to see that if you are at UW. But here you'll hear the variations between the beautiful pavane action and then the fast floating across the prairie. I won't play all of this piece, but you'll hear a little bit of that dichotomy of standing gracefully and moving gracefully. This is performed by the Adzel duo, Stephanie Zelnick and Miriam Adam, clarinetists. So that's a portion of that piece, inspired by our own beautiful pronghorn antelope. And now, bear 399 and cubs at Grand Teton National Park. You see I'm moving up in size from microscopic all the way to a giant bear. So bear 399 is a relatively famous bear in the Grand Teton Park area. And she is a grand matriarch who has been producing cubs for a long time, over 20 years, which is pretty impressive. And one of her tactics for survival is to have her babies near people. So she will raise the cubs near all of the activity and lodges and what have you at the park. And the reason is because male grizzlies will attack babies. And so rather than fight babies, she chooses to stay in the human populated areas. It's a pretty clever survival strategy. However, it has its problems. And back in 2016, she had a single cub, beautiful blonde-faced baby cub, who visited us at the research station where I work, among other places. But sadly, the baby was hit by a car, and it didn't survive. It produced a lot of efforts to have people slow down in the park, which was good. But it was really sad, and people were sad, and of course, I'm sure the bear was having deep emotions about it. But the next year, she had cubs. And the next year was the year of the Great Eclipse, the Great Northern Eclipse. And so what happened during that year was I was having a residency in the park, and I was thinking about this bear a lot. And I started to think about what had happened to her and how I would have felt in that situation, and created a narrative in my head about a bear who, when the eclipse happened, started looking up at the sky and thinking about, as the stars come out, thinking about Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. And so there was this very sad moment in the middle. But then we know that she had cubs, 2 cubs the next year. And so in the end, she comes out of it really joyful and full of, playful cub energy. So that's sort of the shape of the piece is jaunty bears, very sad, and then more jaunty bears. And then a couple of musical things that inspired it. First of all, I used it I put it in the key of B Lydian, because B for bears. And Lydian is a very sunny key, if you know anything about music, because the 4 is sharp and a little bit higher, and so it feels kind of bright. And the first 3 notes are B, E, and A, and then the last note is R, or re, in musical parlance, which is the second of the scale. So the first 4 notes you hear are the whole theme of the entire piece. So I'm going to play you a bit of this, at least until the stars come out, and you'll hear a pizzicato and some extended techniques where the bass plays harmonics and overtones. So this is my piece called The Bear and the Eclipse, which is dedicated to Bear 3. it does impact the bears do come back. So that's a sample of the bear in the eclipse, inspired by my residencies up at the University of Wyoming National Park Service Research Station, where I now work in the summers. Okay, now I just wanted to say that performance was by members of the Grand Teton Music Festival Orchestra, who come to a festival that I run at the station. And those performers are the best performers in the world. They play in the most amazing symphonies all over, and they gather in Wyoming precisely for the reasons that I'm talking about: the beauty, the animals, and the gorgeousness that surrounds us every day. Here in this slide, you see on the right, there's a picture of a scene from one of my operas. We call it Locust, an environmental murder mystery, in which a scientist, who you see standing here, interacts with the ghost of the Rocky Mountain locust, a species that has gone extinct. And so they are trying, the scientist is dialoguing with the spirit of the many trillions of locusts that have died, and he is trying to figure out how they disappeared. And so it's a murder mystery. But I want you to know that The Locust was performed, again, collaboration with a UW scientist, Dr. Jeffrey Lockwood, and art professor Ashley Carlisle, who designed this beautiful set and the dresses. And it's been performed on 3 different continents, including most recently in Scotland for the Glasgow COP26 Climate Summit. My piece, Fanfare for Mountains and Peace, a symphony celebrating connections between North and South America, in this case specifically Bolivia, was inspired by how high altitude and our respective folk musics. And I have a choral work called I Have Loved the Stars, which is for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass choral choir, and it's about the night skies of Wyoming, and it's based on a poem of about astronomers. And these pieces have been performed all over, so I haven't been limited by the fact that Wyoming doesn't have that many people. Ideas for the future, basically limitless ideas for me. Science, culture, nature, ecology, and Wyoming, and plenty of people at UW who help me understand that and track down these ideas and collaborate, helps me understand the beauty and preciousness, as well as the science of the state. So, for example, the Adzel duo, the clarinets you heard, and I are going to work on a concerto that's based on thermophile bacteria of Yellowstone. With botany, with Dr. Naomi Ward and Professor Ashley Hope Carlisle, we're going to create instruments that are botanical, like giant seeds and strange stringed instruments that look botanical. And then I'm going to write music for them. And we're going to travel around to look at interesting botanical gardens. I'm doing more operas right now with my friend Jeff of entomology and Ashley of art. I'm going to do a string quartet at some point based on migration routes, and I can just go on and on about all the wonderful inspiration that has happened from place-based creativity. So I want to let you know that compelling stories and compelling music and dynamic collaborators has created an amazing career for me, including Wyoming and its people, UW people especially, but also the Grand Teton Music Festival Orchestra members shown here. They're all in love with Wyoming. And then new audiences for my music, including scientists and grants and science meetings and conferences. And so I think that if you're willing to look a little outside of the box, there's so much inspiration and creativity here at the University of Wyoming. Wyoming's rich with opportunities and resources for creative and collaborative folks in all fields.